They weren't going to be able to show these to the FDA, saying, hey, look, aspartame, even with milk, caused monkeys to have grand mal seizures. And so they got the test results they wanted by manipulating the method. This is not to say that aspartame was safe or that aspartame does not induce seizures, because it does. It's just to show you that the scientific data nowadays is unreliable.
Now, the amino acids are contained in food, but if you have protein, meat, fish, and so forth, there may be 4% phenylalanine in the food, but not 50%. And we simply, biologically, don't know how to react to this flooding of these enormous amounts of amino acids in the body, especially the phenylalanine, which crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's meant to protect against, biologically, against poisons and so forth.
It's also what's called a dipeptide. That is, it is two amino acids stuck together. One of those amino acids is something called phenylalanine. Phenylalanine is the building block for another important neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. So when you take in aspartame, you'll increase the availability of one and you'll decrease the availability of the other. You'll change ratios. And when you do that, when you change ratios of norepinephrine and serotonin, you certainly affect brain function. And this can lead then to mood symptoms, to panic symptoms in some people. It'll affect seizure threshold, which is why I think I saw the seizure in this initial patient back in 1985, and why I saw a lot of seizure activity in people who were taking in a great deal of aspartame.
They knew that this product, aspartame, with time breaks down into a product called diketopiperazine. Diketopiperazine chemically is closely related to a carcinogenic compound that causes cancer in a lot of animals if they're exposed to it, and humans. These are the sort of things that's in the Bressler report that the makers of NutraSweet would not like the public to know about, because it's very frightening. When the pathologist, Dr. Adrian Gross, looked at the material as well, very well-regarded pathologist, and he looked at it and he was absolutely shocked. He said it's just an enormous increase in tumors, particularly the brain tumors. And of course that's exactly what we're seeing now, is this tremendous increase in brain tumors in this country, which is completely unexplained by the neurological profession.
When the body metabolizes, when it breaks down aspartame, you wind up with a small amount of methanol, which is wood alcohol. That in turn is broken down into formaldehyde, which the body cannot get rid of, the body stores. Now, the industry has made a big deal about supposedly the fact, it's not really a fact, but what they claim is that when you take in fruit, you take in more methanol. They don't add the fact that in nature, the methanol in fruit is bound to something called pectin. Humans lack the enzyme to split the methanol off from pectin, so it goes through the body without doing any damage whatsoever. The body doesn't get exposed to the methanol because it's bound to pectin. So even though there's more of it, it's totally harmless in fruit. But with aspartame, you have the pure, unadulterated, free methanol and then formaldehyde. It's a small amount, but the body can't get rid of it. It's a cumulative phenomenon. So we have very, very toxic products.
Methyl alcohol is just deadly and probably provides most of the poisoning attributed to ethyl alcohol and alcoholics. It is the deadly one.
Ultimately, FDA, using its good offices, interestingly enough, a major person there, created a meeting between me, Cyril, and General Foods, which was going to be one of the main customers. And we met. And I said I didn't think that this would ever reach the market. And they said, well, they were sure it was going to be approved. And I thought that we were on 180 degrees opposite sides. It turned out that it was approved, but FDA asked them not to market it. And they held it up so that there could be hearings and so forth. Now one very strange fact in all of that is that I knew that they had the brain damage study from Olney's lab that their own people had done. And we talked about the various pieces of evidence that were problems. And I finally said, what about the brain damage problem from the animals in Dr. Olney's laboratory that your own people have gone and looked at? And he said, we don't think those are going to be a problem. Well, it turned out they weren't a problem because they didn't give them to the FDA. So here they had in their own files a study that raised very serious questions, but they did not give to the FDA. That's a violation of law.
The common denominator for all of this, unfortunately, is money. And the amount of money that was flashed around induced people to drop the lawsuit against G.D. Searle and come work for the very firm that they were going to try for illegal activity. And that's what happened with the U.S. attorney. That's what happened with several people working for the Food and Drug Administration at that time. If they passed aspartame, literally, they were promised great jobs when they finished with FDA.
And it was interesting, the main guy that made the decisions that overruled them in the Bureau of Foods went on to work for the Soft Drink Association. And actually 7 of the key people that made decisions that kept NutraSweet moving through the process ended up working for one or another NutraSweet using industry. That's kind of an interesting side effect to the whole thing. Donald Rumsfeld went into the company after he left Washington, after Ford lost, and that would be in 1977. Is in business, and he was the congressman from there. And then he went to the White House, where he was White House Chief of Staff, and then he became the Secretary of Defense. And he's involved in a whole group of people around Chicago that are they're involved in a whole range of things, national security being one of them. He took over this company, and it was going down the tubes completely. It had FDA investigations. It had grand jury investigations. It was losing money. Its stock was down. A person was hired to come in and explain why the FDA was so down on them, and went through all of their records and said, you guys haven't got a chance. This company is a mess, a total mess. And he went in with a full team of politicians. He went in with himself, a politician. He brought his special assistant, who was a Republican Party operative, worked with the Republican National Committee, brought in a press guy from there, brought in lawyers, and they took on the issue of this company as a political issue. And one of the first things that not first, but somewhere in that first year, it was late in the year, he called me and said, let's have a meeting. So I went and I met with him. We flew into the Madison Hotel and we met and we talked. So we had this meeting. And for about 6 months, his staff and I and our group negotiated out how we could proceed on this. His own scientists didn't want to do it. For example, at the time that they put their evidence into FDA in 1973, there were no requirements at FDA to examine effects on the brain from food additives. No requirements whatsoever. So there never was a study done to look at whether or not this affected the brain in a neurological sense. The cancer studies were incidental. Those were cancer studies. But these were not brain studies. The cancer studies turned up brain tumors. But they didn't look, for example, at these holes in the brain